if we pull our collective connections outside there, regionally and internationally, we can be a valuable assistance. And therefore, we wanted to be here physically at the leadership level of CARICOM to show the people that when one is hurt, all feel the pain.
Harvey, Irma, Maria. These are names that many people across the Caribbean would prefer not to hear anytime soon. After these Category 5 hurricanes tore through the region within the space of 2 weeks in 2017, communities in the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos, among others, were left with the heavy task of rebuilding. Events like these bring together the collaborative efforts of such regional bodies as the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency and the Regional Security System. In turn, they mobilize the Caribbean Disaster Management Unit for assessment and relief operations. The executive director of CDEMA explains that although small islands may be devastated by a hurricane, the regional agencies are here to help.
We visited Barbuda, the British Virgin Islands, and Anguilla, and later on Turks and Caicos Islands, particularly Providenciales, and in the Bahamas, one of the smaller islands, Ragged Island, that would have been impacted. Following our return, we also had a chance to visit Dominica, which saw the ravages of Hurricane Maria. Both hurricanes were Category 5 plus hurricanes. And it's the first time in the region's history that islands were impacted by a Category 5 hurricane, but also multiple island impacts within the space of 7 days. My trip to these islands really revealed what we would have seen in the news, what we would have seen from aerial photographs. It gave us a chance to see the extent of damage in these islands, and in particular communities, and how the citizens were coping in the aftermath of the passage of these hurricanes. We saw those who were still cheerful amidst the challenges they were facing, those who had smiles, which brought the hope that they would build back and build back better. We saw those who were struggling with the trauma of the event. And so our efforts towards addressing the needs, ramping up relief, were essentially paramount in bringing some normality back to the lives of the CARICOM citizens who were affected in these states.
Well, we are here basically to support you guys and show that the entire Caribbean region is supporting what you guys in the reconstruction effort. We are going to be there with you. Yeah.
We had a chance to visit Ragged Island, an island housing about 70 to 80 people, where the main industry there is lobster fishing and most likely also conch fishing, which is the main staple in the Bahamas. Most of the housing stock, if not all, saw significant damage to their roofing, as well as a few that would have been destroyed, reduced to rubble by virtue of the impact of the hurricane.
The Regional Security System is a significant partner to CDEMA, which is the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency. And in collaborating with CDEMA, we would have mobilized the CDRU, which is the CARICOM Disaster Relief Unit, in response to Hurricane Irma, which would have impacted the BVI, Turks and Caicos, as well as Antigua and Barbuda, more specifically Barbuda. That mobilization saw military, police, and firemen from Barbados, St. Lucia, Guyana, Jamaica, Bahamas, deploying to the impacted states in order to firstly conduct damage assessment, as well as recce teams to look at the impacted areas and to make recommendations as to how to commence the relief efforts. The RSS would also have used our aircraft not only to insert the CDRU, but to assist with moving high-level ministerial teams to visit the areas and to offer support to the political directive of those impacted states. So the relationship with CDEMA is one that we work very, very closely in order to respond to humanitarian assistance and disaster situations within the Caribbean region.
Captain Sherlin told us about the resilience of the Caribbean people, especially during a crisis.
The impact of Hurricane Irma on Ragged Island in the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos was significant. Several of the homes there, the roofs and so on, were totally destroyed. Angola, a similar situation. But the people of the Caribbean are resilient people, and while we were there, we would have observed people trying to help themselves, people trying to get their lives back in order.
In his role as Minister of Home Affairs and past chairman of the regional ministers, Barbados' Attorney General said that the trip was just a continuation of a series of visits to the affected islands.
This trip was just a follow-up to see the level of damage also inflicted on the Turks and Caicos and the Bahamas. The intention of the delegation was just not to look at the damage that was inflicted, but to get a sense in terms of the nature of the response that was already being provided and to get a sense of what else was required. And in particular, we looked at one of the schools which was being used as a shelter by some of the residents who had been displaced. I have to say it was a bit of a shock to me on a personal level to see the nature of the damage that had been inflicted by the hurricane and to see people really who had nowhere to live.
Yes. It's me. You just showed me some of the challenges that we continue to have post Irma.
The frequency and ferocity of these hurricanes is a cause of concern for regional officials. They are of the view that global climate change may be a contributing factor.
Those who don't want to understand that climate change is here to stay and that we need to start everything we do that fact of climate change must be there and vulnerability must be there. So I think those two major issues, and educating our people and be constantly prepared.
The visit also allowed the Secretary General and Prime Minister Mitchell to convey to his colleague, head of state, the commitment to continue to support the government of these countries through very difficult and challenging times.
It is really unprecedented in terms of the breadth of the damage. And only last year around this time I was here in visiting, touring the Bahamas. We went to Grand Bahama and to Andros, and the level of destruction and the stories that we heard. And I think the year before that it was the Southern Islands. This is just happening. I don't want to say like that, but it's almost a way of life that we have to come to terms with. The climate change is here. Somebody referred to persons affected by the storm as climate refugees, which is serious business. And we're going to need help to rebuild. It's going to be a long haul. I have to commend him publicly, Ronald Jackson, the Executive Director of CDEMA, and the Head Executive Director of the RSS. They have been doing human service to our region. The first responders are always Caribbean people. We stage our first responders, and they come from all our various islands at strategic locations, so that as soon as the storm passes, the hurricane passes, they're in. The RSS is critical, the coast guards of our member states are critical, and we have the points in Jamaica, the point in Barbados, and in between doing this work. And I don't think we realize how much work is done by Caribbean people themselves.
The images of the destruction were a constant reminder of how vulnerable our communities are and therefore we cannot be complacent when it comes to protecting our properties and our lives.
I've seen many hurricane impacts before, but to see entire people across our country in so many different states in this situation tells me that we're facing a new normal. It is not the hurricane season of old. I've never seen 3 Category 5 hurricanes passing through the Caribbean, the Leeward Islands, back to back.
This very active hurricane season has left policymakers with many lessons on how to try to minimize the damage that can be caused by these new types of super hurricanes.
The Caribbean has the potential to build back better, to build sound housing and infrastructure, and we must capture the lessons provided by the buildings we saw standing, the rooftops that remain on. Ask ourselves why did these remain intact? What can we learn from them in going forward in designing? How can we work with artisans and people in the local communities to really build sound housing so that the next event does not see a similar wide-scale displacement of our communities in these countries?
In order for us to be more resilient, we have to be conscious of what the impact is going to be. We have to look at our building codes in order to build stronger homes that can withstand the type of systems that are coming through the region. We have to plan, whether it is hurricane shutters, whether it's hurricane straps, whether it is having a room in your home that can withstand a Category 3 or a Category 4 hurricane. But the whole preparation and planning has got to be the key issue that I would wish people to take away from these kinds of experiences, because if we don't plan, then we will never be prepared to deal with a hurricane.
For our member states who have often said that God is a Trini or God is a Bayesian, and in particular Barbados, where CDEMA is located, we want to encourage vigilance in our communities in Barbados and other islands which are not used to seeing frequent hurricane and tropical storm impacts. What we're recognizing is that hurricanes are developing much faster than they used to in the past. They're developing within areas they never developed to those magnitudes in the past, and there is no guarantee anymore that any of our islands are safe from the ravages of these climatic events.
You know, in Barbados, we have been very lucky. From 1955, when we had Janet, very, very lucky. The talk of God being a Bayesian, we need to dispel that, and we need to, here in Barbados, prepare for the inevitable. Throughout the region, I think we need to, again, plan and prepare, whether it is stocking up water, whether it is having a strong room in the house, whether it is constructing our homes in a more resilient way. But we need to be mindful of the risk and think in a way that how can we minimize the risk associated with a severe weather system.
If I can leave one final message to my fellow Barbadians and citizens, which is that yes, we have been spared, but we need to move our preparedness to a completely different level. The indications are that over the foreseeable future, the type of hurricanes that we've seen this year will become the norm. That is Category 4 and 5. And therefore, we need to take our state of preparedness as a country, individually and collectively, to a completely different level. God is not a Bayesian like some of us like to say.